The Jersey Shore Board of Directors meeting for August the 14th, 2023 will come to order. Roll call, Mr. Enders.
Mr. Allen.
Present.
Mrs. Calhoun.
Here.
Ms. Dobler.
Here.
Ms. Edwards.
Here.
Mrs. Grant. Mr. Kinley. Mrs. Petrosky.
Here.
Mrs. Stemler.
Here.
Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
7 members present, 2 absent.
Next will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Presentations. First, we have communications by Dr. Almer.
Kayla said there's no picture.
She doesn't have a picture. I'm going to start tonight with PSBA School Board Service Recognition. PSBA actually keeps track of and recognizes board members who have reached a certain milestone in service. There's a couple different recognitions. The first one is when a school board member reaches 8 years of service, they receive an honor roll certificate, and then every 4 years after that. They do receive plaques after 24 years of service. Tonight, I'm going to be handing out 2 honor roll certificates. One of them is for 8 years of service to the Jersey Shore Area School District, and that actually is to Mrs. Thomas.
Thank you.
And the other one is an honor roll certificate for 16 years of service, and that is to Mrs. Petrosky. Thank you both for your service. I'm going to recognize 2 different individuals tonight. I'm going to start with PFM, and there's 2 representatives tonight here from PFM. I will let them introduce themselves. They also have handouts for the board. If you recall, while they're getting set up, we had a capital projects conversation about projects in the district, and we're going to get to that in a second with Site Logic. But part of that conversation was making sure that we looked at our financial picture and that we had an idea of what money the district could finance to support any projects that we would want to do going forward. They are going to explain the handout that you have in front of you that would give you an idea what borrowing opportunities you have and where we could finance any potential projects. So I'll turn it over and let them take the floor and introduce themselves.
Great. Hi, my name is Melissa Hughes, and as Dr. Almer indicated, I'm here from PFM. You're probably used to seeing Jamie Doyle. She is unable to be here tonight, but I have worked behind the scenes on the district's financings for the last 10 years. And Carly Kiesling has joined our team for the last few. So we're pretty familiar with the district behind the scenes. It's very nice to be in front of you tonight. So I'm going to start by talking about the interest rate environment. So if you take that handout and you go to page 2, so just flip it over, and you're going to see all those graphs. How many folks have been paying attention to the news and have heard on the news a lot recently that the Federal Reserve is raising short-term interest rates? You probably hear that every time you turn on the TV. That's definitely true. And that probably leads you to think, oh my goodness, rates to borrow must be very, very high. Well, that's not the whole truth, because the Federal Reserve has been driving up short-term rates, so the rates in year 1, but the long-term rates, so the rates in year 10, 11, 12, on out, where you borrow for capital projects that haven't risen as fast. So those short-term borrowing rates, the short-term rates that you can invest at for things like your general fund or capital projects fund or borrowed proceeds are higher than the rate that you could potentially borrow at today, okay? And that's what you can see on that graph, that top graph. So what that shows, that blue line, is today's yield curve. So normally it should be shaped like this, whoop, going like this, half of rainbow. It doesn't look like that right now, right? It looks like whoop, swoop. And that's because just what I described to you. Those short-term rates are higher than those long-term rates. So that's something to think about as you're considering what to do, if anything, with your cash position, if you want to borrow, just to give you some perspective. The middle graph shows you what interest rates have done on the 10-year rate. So this isn't a rate quote for what you could go get a 10-year loan at. This is if you have perfect credit rating, what you could get for a 10-year rate. So just like you and I have credit scores, the school district has a credit rating. It's very good, an A+ credit rating, but it's not perfect, right? So there's a spread between perfect credit rating and what you can actually get in the market. So this is the perfect credit rating. And you can see how rates have trended over time. So they're higher than they were 2 years ago in 2020 and 2021 when we did the last set of refinancings, got some awesomely low rates, but they're in line with historic averages. So for those of you who've been on the board for 12 and 16 years, they're more in line with what you borrowed at historically in the past. That bottom graph just shows you the trend over the last year and a half or so, since January 2022. Let's talk about the district's existing debt. That's on page 3. The top half of this page shows the gross debt service, the principal and interest that the district is obligated to pay to its bond and note holders. You have 2 bank loans, they're both with KeyBank. At the bottom half of the page, column 10, that's your local effort, net of state aid, because you do get a little bit of state reimbursement on all of your existing bond issues. Very, very little on this series of 2021. You still get some. So that column 10 is the district's local effort. That's the column that we focus on when we're thinking about what is the impact of any potential new borrowing on the district's finances. So that's what we'll focus on. One line on this page that I draw your attention to, there at the bottom, says coupon rate. Okay? When you do bond issues, each of the years has its own coupon rate. When you do a bank loan, there is a single fixed rate. So your 2019 bonds, they have coupon rates ranging from 2 to 5. It's mostly 2%, 0.5% in there. And your bank loans have a fixed rate of 1.688% and 0.8%. So incredibly low rates on this last year. So just want to understand that as we're thinking about our options going forward. I think it maybe goes without saying, but there are no opportunities to refinance for savings right now, where we take and replace old higher rates with today's lower rates, because you'll have to be such a big rate. So on page number 4, I want to remind the district of a few facts. So anytime you're thinking about any capital planning, the IRS asks you to consider a few tests. The first test that they ask you to consider is an expenditure test. Before you go into any borrowing, you have to have reasonable expectations. You can spend 85% of the money that you borrow within 3 years. You can meet those reasonable expectations by having a draw schedule from your architect or escrow provider that says, given this project, here's how much the district could expect to spend in any given month, okay? Next, you have to meet the time test. So that one is within 6 months of when you borrow, you have to have reasonable expectations that you can enter into a substantial binding obligation to spend 5% of the money you borrow. It's not that you have to spend 5%, it's that you have to have a contract. Usually that's your ESCO contract, your architect's contract, your engineer's contract, the township. And then finally, you have to proceed with due diligence to do a project. Doesn't mean that things can't get slowed down. We saw a lot of that during COVID, but people were, continuing to move forward. But are you continuing to take actions to move the project along? Okay? So that's a question that we hear often from folks is, how do I know when I can think about borrowing? And these are the tests we look to help understand that. Put it in context. You're going to notice that both of the numbers we're going to show for illustrative purposes are for $10 million. And that's because if you borrow $10 million or less, the IRS gives special tax considerations, slightly lower interest rates, and a more flexible 5-year call feature. So that call feature means you can refund your bonds or loans, whichever it is, after 5 years instead of after 10 years. So that provides you more flexibility and better ability to manage your debt portfolio over time. Okay? That doesn't mean you have to call the bonds, it means you can. And finally, a reimbursement resolution. If a board is in a situation where they're not ready to borrow money quite yet, but they're starting to spend money on projects, you can pass what's called a reimbursement resolution, which is a no harm, no foul resolution that puts a stake in the ground and says, from this day and back 60 days, so 60 days back from that date, we can reimburse ourselves from a borrowing in the future. Okay? Otherwise, the day you go to do the borrowing, you can only look back 60 days from that date. Okay? I like to think of it as putting a doorstop in. It holds the door open, and then you decide whether you want to go through and reimburse yourself or not. But otherwise, you can't go through the door. Okay. On page number 5, this is an illustration of 2 different borrowing scenarios. I'm going to talk you through how to read it. In column 3, those are the fiscal years. We're here in fiscal year 2024. So your debt service is perfectly level at $2.5 million. It drops off after 2029, and then after 2030, there's no debt service. This is your local effort we brought forward from that prior page. If you wanted to do a borrowing of $10 million in November of this year, we'll talk about why that date was picked in a moment, basically as fast as you could do it, logistically. For a term of 15 years, where we wrap around, meaning we fill principal in as the old debt service starts to pay off, which you can see in column 5, to give you the total local effort in column 6. So you'd need about $450,000 of incremental local effort, new local effort. You can come up with that however makes sense from your perspective, from a budgetary perspective. Work with Mr. Enders on that. Okay? In scenario 2, we did the same thing, but over a 20-year term. So the things to think about when you're comparing a 15-year versus a 20-year term. When you borrow for a longer period of time, you're going to pay interest over a longer period of time. So if you compare those numbers at the bottoms of columns 5 and column 7, column 5 is less than column 7 because it's over a shorter period of time. However, the trade-off is your annual payment when you get to your debt drop-off or we're starting to fill it in. Column 7 gives you more flexibility for potential future needs 10 years from now. It provides you greater flexibility in the future. So it's that more or less interest versus more or less flexibility. And there's no right or wrong answer. Both can be good choices about understanding what your trajectory is like as a district or being able to maintain your buildings. On page number 6, this illustrates a sample timeline. Okay? And this is the fastest the district could move. So Carly and I are here tonight making a presentation to the board. If you were so inclined, at your September the 11th meeting, you could authorize the financing team to proceed with that sample motion above. On September the 25th, you come back with a resolution from bond council called a parameter resolution. That's the legal debt incurring action. And then as early as October the 4th is when you could have your competitive internet auction and lock in rates. That means that on November the 8th would be the fastest you could get money in your construction fund. We're not suggesting that you should move that fast, but we're showing you, all right, how long does it take from when I say go to when I get money in my construction fund? Okay. I'm going to stop here and see if folks have questions.
Questions from the board? One of the things go ahead.
Well, I actually don't have one for them, I have one more for you and Ms.
Okay.
Reavers, if you're okay with that.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay, so according to the money on page 5, if we were to borrow at the 15-year, it's $450,000 added extra to our budget that we currently have till 2030. Added to our 2.5 million.
Correct.
So I would like to know where you plan on coming up with $500,000, basically, the 456, 457, 466 each year added on to the 2.5 million.
You're not adding that each year, that goes up one, so that, make sure you understand, you're not adding that amount every year. It goes up one time, like that
So it's rolling in.
2.9 is fully in, you're not
Okay.
adding another $500,000 each year, I wanna make sure that we're
So once you
talking
find the
about-
$500,000, it's there, if
It's
it's the
there
same.
into the column 6.
Yes.
Okay,
Column 6 is your total annual payment,
got it.
it's not going up each year.
Okay. But it's still going to cost us 500,000.
Correct.
Okay. So where are you proposing that money's coming from to do that?
I would say go to page, Ben can answer too if he wants, but I would say go to page 7, because she didn't get there yet, but that is something that's standard on their document, is a list of things to look at for additional money. Those are essentially your options.
So essentially then you're saying that none of these options here, in essence, are really coming out of any of our personal accounts. I mean, as in, I see that some of it's, you could raise taxes, cut cost savings in different areas. I mean, I see the list here, but it's still not making total sense to me. You're still gonna have to come up with that money.
So they're gonna have to come up with.
Correct. So do you propose where that's going to come from? Have you considered, or what, do you have a recommendation on thinking that through, on what you think would be best, on where that's coming from?
I would say not at the moment. One of the things that we have talked about, and one of the reasons I want you to see this is because a year ago when you saw this, that didn't look that way. And one of the conversations that Ben and I had with PFM was a year ago, this same scenario didn't raise your annual obligation that high because you had the ability at that interest rate to wrap your current debt into your borrowing. You no longer have that option without it costing you significant money because you are not looking at the same long-term interest rates that we were looking at a year ago.
Correct.
So I don't have a crystal ball. And one of the reasons that we wanted the Capital Projects Committee and I wanted you to see this is because a year out from where we were, and if you go back to page 3, in 2021 when we did this, your bond refinancing was at 0.8%. that was when this conversation began, which would have allowed us to wrap existing debt into current, the existing refinancing and going forward, your annual payment would not have changed, and you had the ability to go out and get money and do much more than $10 million. We're not there anymore.
I realize that. I remember Jamie Doyle being here and speaking on behalf of what we could have had done at the time. And if I'm correct in my memory, I think it was about $30 million we could have borrowed.
I think it was 33.
And not raise any millage rates, wrapping our debt. I remember her presentation. It sounded almost too good to be true compared to the numbers that we recently received this week. Because I had also saw, and I'm not sure who to ask on this, but I think a year ago it was like maybe 1.8 was the percentage rate, and now it's like 2.7 possibly. Am I right on that?
So if you borrowed at a long-term rate today, so you're comparing the MMD chart, that 10-year rate, right? So that difference between the 10-year rate, it is up over 1%. You're right, that's the rough kind of magnitude of the change.
So then is it safe to say like it's basically borrowing money and paying 50% more than it would have been last year in essence?
In terms of interest, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a fair assertion. You might have borrowed at all in 2% last year, and now it'd be more like 4. In the historical perspective, 4 is still great, but it's not 2.
Agreed.
And we all kind of know, we know some of these things intuitively in our personal lives when we hear folks talking about mortgages, right? You know, 6 and 7% mortgages. You know, 20 years ago, that was a really good mortgage rate. Even 10 years ago, that was a decent mortgage rate. But compared to the mortgage rates that have been available for the last 5 years, right, that's where you get increase.
Okay, thank you.
Also consider, Mrs. Stemler, as Dr. Ulmer talked about a year ago where we were and what we could have done. One of the other things that Melissa was talking about was, and one of the reasons why we presented it at the fast track is we will be able to invest these funds. And what she's talking about is inverted yield curve. You'll get $10 million, and I'm just going to use hypothetical numbers. We'll pay 2% on $10 million. We can invest $10 million and get 5%. That's an inverted yield curve. We're getting more money than we're actually paying for the money. We're still in that window, that possibility. We'll see how long that window stays open. One other thing to think about, and since I've been here, we did a lot of them, especially when I first started. Prior boards, probably when they started doing these borrowings, looked at it, like we're looking at it, saying, we're gonna have to pay $1.3 million approximately from 2030 to 2039. Without the crystal ball, as Dr. Ulmer said, we don't know what's gonna happen in 2032. We could have the same market that we had from when I started in 2017 to about 2021, where we did refinancings about every 6 months. So could it be, as we look at this today, it may not be $1.3 million when we get to that point. It might not even be $2.9 million in 2029. Because we will be borrowing at, Melissa's talking about, is a larger interest rate than what we were used to the past 2 years. Will there be a downturn where we can start refinancing, the opportunity will be back? Or we'll have an opportunity where she's staying in front of us again and saying, well, you have really good interest rates, like she just did a couple minutes ago, saying in 2021, your interest rate's 0.8%. I'll say 0.8, so I'm very clear, it's 8%, 0.8%. That's the crystal balls, it's tough to gauge.
For an example, not an example, as a question, what did we originally borrow that money at? Is that what the
It's
two,
going back
is that
to-
what the 2 and the 2.5 is, or was it even
No,
higher
I mean,
than?
this is, if you look on page 3, it'll look at the purposes, and those are the original those are the original debts of 2012, and I actually think some of that time frame, that 2012 and 2015, and there's are refinancings of like 04s and,
Some of them are, we could follow up with you on what the original rates were. that the
Okay.
rates were on it.
but yeah, you're talking about stuff from the building projects of the early 2000s, and then they were refinanced, and then they were refinanced again.
This what we were doing, what we're looking at now is a 30-year bond, right?
No, this is what they're.
Not the new stuff, the old
Yes.
stuff.
Oh, yes. Originally, they were 30-year bonds.
But we refinanced a
Originally,
few times.
again, through refinancing, and the 2 of them are banknotes. The two key banks are banknotes. So they originally started out as bonds. Yes.
Is there any other questions?
And I want to be clear that, back to what she said about the amount. The purpose of this amount was this is what you could do with bank financing. We didn't, what the Capital Projects Committee discussed, what you could pick and choose and put into a project is below this amount. So this was for illustration purposes of, this is as far as it could go. You have a sense of, if we want to do a project and the project is here, you know this is the top number. So that's another answer to your question is, that was there on purpose because that's a bank qualified amount. Below that is going to be a lower number.
And you're happy to, work with the administration to provide updates as you make decisions on what you might do or not do for different amounts.
Other questions?
We did look at keeping the annual payment at $2.5 million, and you actually cost you more money to do that.
Extremely cost prohibitive.
You end up borrowing money at higher rates to pay off the debt you already have.
Interesting how that works.
Yeah,
I know. Okay.
that's why you don't have it in front of you, because it would be silly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And also because extending out of that capital projects conversation, representatives here tonight from SiteLogic, if you recall, they had presented to capital projects information, taking our information from the priority list that Mr. Wall and I put together and presented to capital projects, updated those numbers for us, and took a look at middle school just so that you had a sense of changes to amounts. I asked them to come tonight to be here to answer questions that may come up from that capital projects meeting conversation. Essentially, the conversation there was, what you're seeing as a result of that tonight is, depending on what we do, and looking at that priority list, and looking at the updated numbers from that list, we know as a capital projects committee that whatever work that the committee and the board decide to do is gonna come from a borrowing, and that's why PFM is here, and it's also gonna come with continued work from SiteLogic, and that's why SiteLogic is here. One of the conversations that the Capital Projects Committee had with SiteLogic is how we move forward and where we go next. And I believe, you can chime in here, ladies, if you have anything you want to add, but the Capital Projects Committee would like to have SiteLogic look at the 2 elementary school buildings that they haven't looked at yet, and look maybe more deeply at the high school since they did all that work at the middle school. And that was the conversation we wanted to have here this evening of What is the will of the board and which direction do we go next? Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Good evening, Damien Spar with SiteLogic. The other thing that we said that we would do is continue our work so that the district will have the opportunity to start this work next summer. Gone are the days where we can do all this work in the first quarter of the new year, get pricing for things and start in the summer and get any appreciable gain of our work during the summer. We have to start these things nearly a full year ahead. So that's partly why we're here. We have committed to not only the work that we've done so far, kind of at our own risk at the middle school, but doing the same thing with Davis and Salvageburg. So, and on top of that, I've had conversations with Hunt to have Hunt working directly for us. I've worked on what they're going to do and what their fee is to bring that down as well, so that we can kind of keep moving as you were making these decisions and considerations. So we made those commitments to the board that we would keep moving during that past meeting as well.
Questions from the board? I know the question that I received and I actually verbalized it at the Capital Projects Committee was the Capital Projects Committee okay with proceeding verbally? I don't remember what answer I got from that, but I have obviously other board members that watched that brought that up, and so I'm opening that up to the board. Are you comfortable with that going forward, or do you want Damien to put something in writing on a future agenda?
Yes.
No, he asked you two things, Jesse. You want something in writing?
No, I think you're right. I don't. I don't even know how to even start with that one. I'm sorry. Not saying I
The
don't
question
want-
is, are you comfortable where we're at, or would you like to have something in writing?
I would be comfortable with writing, but I mean, I wasn't at the Capitol meeting, so my question is, Ben, what can we afford? I sound bad saying that, but we're starting out the new school year and we're talking about, the last handout, the last thing we were given for the middle school was a lot of work, a lot of contract work, and we had to decide what we could afford on that list, and now we're gonna add more to a list that we can't even afford. Am I?
We're talking about the same list. I
Okay,
mean,
same
that
list,
list
and
went to
then
capital
adding-
projects. And the conversation there was,
To add more to it.
no, the conversation there was, if we want to do any of this stuff, it's going to come with a financing conversation. And whatever on that list we determine is going to happen, it's going to be with SiteLogic as construction management. And the question that I'm asking is, do you want them to reduce into writing, this is what construction management looks like, and this is how they will guide a process?
Right, and I understand that. I guess what I don't understand is, when were two elementary school added to the middle school?
Are you talking about that middle school, that big project thing that we just got not too long ago?
No, like the boilers?
No, that whole
The-
sheet that,
Yes. So
that was only done though for the purpose of how rates for purchasing
Has
have gone
changed.
up.
For
So
the
it's not
for
to
the
do
middle
work.
school.
Right.
Right.
So our conversation at Capital Projects, so to answer your question about elementary, was to make an informed decision about what we would potentially do, if anything. the Capital Projects Committee had discussed with Site Logic, wanting to see that similar type of report for elementary schools. So we weren't making a decision about what to move forward with based on only looking at one building.
I must not be understanding because wasn't that the Hunt study that,
Correct. But remember, they updated numbers and information based on they took the Hunt study and updated it with current market rates of the project. So the Capital Projects Committee is saying, before we take a stab in the dark and say, let's move ahead with what we prioritize, we would like to know what market rate looks like for each one of those things and not be estimating it based on one building's cost.
okay. Okay. All right.
There's something that I might be able to help.
Go ahead.
with clarity. We did the middle school because we wanted to show the district a format of, here's how we can look at a building so you can plan very long term. So we did the middle school, and I think that the administration in general looked at it and said, this is a good planning tool. From that middle school, we identified about $3.6 million of things that you might consider doing there that will be needed in the near term. The district, along with Site Logic and the use of the Hunt study, looked at other buildings and said, these are other needs that we know that we have. So we created this list that gets to about $9 million because Mr. Wall and the rest of the administration are pretty aware of where there are pinch points that are going to need to be taken care of short term. Adding those other two buildings is simply a validation that we know where the big things are in those other buildings. Is there anything else out there that we need to see so we can be thoughtful about the entire set of buildings? We don't think that we're going to go into those other buildings and create that plan that we did for the middle school, which is meant to go out over many, many, many years, and find huge issues that we aren't aware of from already things that we've looked at and what we've talked to the district about. We can find other things. What we would do then is look at those things in priority. If we want to choose to afford X amount of dollars, here's how we're going to prioritize the projects across all of the schools. So it's not, I don't want you to look at it like we just added a whole bunch of unknown to the list, because that's not what we quite did. Does that help you understand it a little bit more?
Yeah. I think it's just, you can word it any way, but either way, it's more projects. But for Mr. Wall, can you ask Mr. Wall what his thoughts are with what he thinks of the list? I think I'd
Sure.
like to know what his pinpoints would be.
Meaning, if he agrees with the list, or,
If his list is different.
well,
maybe.
the priority list that you already have that we gave to them
Right,
was developed by Mark and I.
okay. All right. Okay. Now, I don't have any more questions.
Any other board questions?
I don't have any questions, but I myself would prefer, and on moving forward, that we have something in writing on both ends, just to protect both parties involved. And not knowing what we're going to do when it comes to the presentation that we were handed tonight and considering borrowing money, because I believe that it's inevitable at some point we are going to need to borrow money to do some of the projects that we're faced with, the ones that are on high alert. I mean, at some point in time, it's inevitable, and I realize that. I think the question is this the right time? I don't think any of us can honestly answer that because we don't know the future. But in past votes over the past year, it's been a lot of spending. And I just don't see where this board is interested in cost savings. Not like I am. And I know a few others that are absent tonight. So I just throw that out there because I see on the back of this presentation her, I guess you could say her 11 recommendations on how to control that money in helping ourselves. But none of them seem to be very palatable to me. So I still, though, at the next meeting, Mr. Enders and Dr. Almer would like to know where it is that you foresee in borrowing the money for the $500,000 increase. And then moving forward from there, what it looks like. That would be most important, I think, for this board, so we have a clear understanding and a pathway in moving forward on what that's going to entail. I mean, I did see some of, when I say the debt service decreases, but you're only trading that off for 15 more years of debt service, 20 more years of debt service. Yes, I see it's at a lower rate. I understand that, but I think I would like to hear from Mr. Enders on this particular matter, if that's possible, please.
I guess just for clarity, I mean, I'm jotting my note down about paying the extra $500,000. But I guess I missed what you were saying about the lower debt service. I missed that point.
Once you get beyond 2030.
You know,
I think she's saying the annual obligation is lower.
yeah.
Yeah, it's lower, but it's longer. So in my mind, I guess it's just, it's somewhat of a trade-off. You have a lower payment, but it's 15 years out or 20 years out versus without borrowing the money immediately, our debt will be paid off here in 7 years?
2030.
Yeah, 2030. But I mean, that's my other thought was, last year we could have gotten 30 million. This time it's 10. Those things can change over time. So I'm just saying, I'm just making a statement. Is it the wisest time to borrow money? And I just wanted to hear your personal opinion on that. You don't have to answer that tonight, but at the next meeting, I would just like to hear where you're coming from and what you think. You know the finances and the state of things that are, that go on here.
I guess, and on my personal opinion, my big concern right now for the district, my number one priority is obviously finances, but I'm also very concerned about the facilities. I'm very concerned about the middle school. I walk through that building and I shudder. My other concern, the high school being the box on top of the box, the core of the high school is yet to be touched. So that concerns me. And the high school's knocking on the door of their 40th anniversary. When Mr. Armbruster just moved into high school principal and I was up in his office, I found the opening ceremony. It was April of something, I'm pretty sure 1985. I knew one teacher in the pamphlet, but anyways, I digress. I'm concerned about those two buildings. Very concerned about those two buildings.
And I will echo that, and my concern is the things that are on that priority list are not, we're gonna put in new floors and we're gonna paint and the things on that priority list are HVAC systems. They're very critical. Like if they go down, we're not having school. I'm not talking about I want it to look pretty and I want to paint it and I want to put in a new floor. I'm talking about if we don't have heat, we're not having school. We're talking about systems that haven't been touched in 40 years, and those are the priorities. They're not, and when you look at that report, both the Hunt report and the update of the numbers that SiteLogic did, they didn't say things like, well, they're good for 5 or 10 more years. They said things like, this system is at the end of its life and you're on borrowed time and you need to figure it out, which is what we've consistently, I'm not saying it doesn't have a financial ticket attached to it. I'm trying to make sure that we're not in a situation where it's now an emergency because it went down and I can't fix it anymore. And I think somebody asked me that question when we were looking at one of the systems. I think in some of your information, we even have, like, we went to the person who inspects the boilers and says, and asked the question, like, what is your estimate on what's left? And the answer was along the lines of, you should just be happy you got this far. Like, that's not the answer that you want to hear, but it's our reality and it's where we are. We're not talking about painting and putting up nice new ceilings and installing different doors. We're talking about HVAC and air conditioning and room ventilation. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not saying this because I'm trying to push you in a direction. I know there's a financial cost, but it also could be a really devastating response if something goes poorly. So I'm trying to make sure you have all the information. Other questions?
This isn't really a question, but I asked this question during the meeting, like months ago, why we did this just for the middle school. And just what he said tonight, now we're gonna spend more time going back, having them do more work to figure out that information. I think we're wasting a lot of time around here doing this stuff. So we need to get all our ducks in a row here, and I think we do need this in writing as soon as possible, so that we can figure out which way we're going here, and if we do have to borrow money or whatever.
Is there any recommendation coming from the Capital Projects Committee or not at this time?
They would, I believe they said they would like to see updated costs like that on all buildings so that whatever we do move forward with, they feel more comfortable with the numbers. Am I conveying that correctly?
Yes. The priority list that was put together.
So you're talking about the one that says the summer of this 2024 and the
Yes,
summer of 2025?
This is the one that
Okay.
I think we need to follow up.
Not a whole big, just the
You
pictures
would
of
like them to
those?
focus on just that?
Yes.
Not, as Mr. Allen said, you don't need a whole building, you need to focus on those
these.
pieces.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me reiterate something I said, and maybe I wasn't quite clear enough. The good news is, the Hunt study looked at all the buildings. So and Mr. Wall knows, all the buildings inside out. So it's not about those other two buildings or the high school that we're finding things that we don't know, because even when we did the middle school, there wasn't some new thing, and it jumped out at us and we said, oh my goodness, how was this missed? The priority list that you have,
Yes,
that you're referencing,
yeah.
does start to accomplish the things, and it should go a long way to accomplishing the things that Mr. Allen talked about, and what we would be doing, and what I want to do, and what I'm gonna leave here doing, unless you tell me not to, I want to continue, because we're not gonna get to the end if we just stop and start all the time. I want to look at the buildings that we're looking at, I can give you something in writing as to what we're doing, and what's on that priority list. I wanna start down the path of having design so that you can make decisions about real numbers. What you have are estimates. And if I leave here, if I leave a partner of ours, you as a client, and we don't help you move, you won't get to where you know that you need to go, that Dr. Homer just talked about. So we're gonna focus on those priority items and complete the clarity around the other schools, which we don't expect to yield a whole bunch of new different things. Because between a good Hunt study, which we had, what we're seeing that we validated again in the middle school, and all the knowledge of Mark Wall and the rest of the staff, we have a very good understanding of what that is in that priority list that made up what we talked about within that $10 million. Not that you want to afford $9 an investment grade audit report where we're looking at things and we're gonna design some things, and if you choose not to move forward, we'll hand the stuff over to you, and you can pay us, and you can wait. You can just pay us for the stuff we designed, and you'll own it. Or you can choose to move forward. But that's what we can do. The only reason that I didn't ask to do that before is I thought that was more congruent with what the district wanted to do and continuing to get information, and I'm not gonna stop myself from us helping. But if you'd like that type of documentation, we can work that out through administration and council.
These are all items that are in the alarm range, correct? That you put
Yes,
together alarm?
Yes, I would
that must be
categorize
done.
that extra list as
Yes.
alarm rating. Now,
And that includes things like water heaters, heating plant, HVAC, shop ventilation at the high school, things like that, that absolutely have to be done at the top of this list. That's what we're talking about here. And then you have a breakout of the summer of '25 that we're talking about. But what, the most important thing right now that I'm looking at is that top of the list. for
Which is the summer
of
24.
2024. And that includes all the items that I just said. So that's where I'm at with that. I think
and
that
that's a
needs
large
to be
reason
done.
why I suggested we continue to push on, because
Yeah,
if we don't
these
do
items.
that, there will be no summer 2024.
That's what you think? Yeah. Yeah, but
And I like to apologize because now there's clarity. And I think, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I apologize if I do. But I think
that's why
what I'm seeing is the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, which was when we had asked questions,
yeah, that makes sense.
there were people who listened to recommendations and people who didn't listen to recommendations, and I apologize. However, the outer line elementary schools need repairs, and there's things that are old, and now it makes sense when, Dr. Omer, when you said about, you don't want items to, like, if things stop working, then that's a whole shutdown of
Yeah.
education, probably more extensively than a day, correct? We're talking like trailers being moved in, probably, possibly, like, is my mind, because there's some things that really need transferred.
Well, you're talking about heat and hot
Yes,
water
yes,
and,
yes.
right.
So, and that was, you know, the whole, like I said, an elephant in the room, and it wasn't, and I don't wanna hash that up, because we said however it goes, we'll let it go. But that is the elephant in the room, and how how we're gonna pay for it, which is, this is how we're gonna pay for it. So, I just don't want you to think like I'm not listening, I'm not appreciative
Oh, no,
for
not at all.
trying to give us a plan, because we need a plan, we need that, post-preventative plan instead of,
Planning instead of reaction.
yes, exactly.
And I think maybe back when we started to look at the middle school to do the update to the HUD study, I think that the board was still considering what it was gonna do with the elementary program. So it makes sense for us to start looking at buildings that we didn't need disposition of, but at least
Yeah,
provide a
that's
plan
what-
on the middle school to say, if you like the planning document, this is what it's gonna look like. If that's what you like, that's what we can continue on with. And
Right,
so that's why you gotta model it.
right. I have nothing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Also, on my update, there are multiple attachments. I continue to work through job descriptions. There's a job description on my update for department coordinators, and there are 2 policies listed. Those are three policies, sorry. Those are with PSBA updates. None of those are on for approval. They're there for your review. They will not be on for a vote until the next meeting. I also want to point out tonight that there is back-to-school information on the website. Cindy Mason did a great job pulling together the information that the administrative team collected for back-to-school information. It is all collated onto one page with a link right from the main site. It looks great. She did a good job pulling them together. Also, that includes information about student and parent portals that will come out to parents and families individually tomorrow. All schedule and teacher information will be immediately accessible by logging into new parent portals and Focus, and that individual information will come out tomorrow and will all be electronic. That's my report.
What all is that, a parent portal? Can they get in and see their grades? or
Grades,
is it-
schedule, attendance, it will all be accessible
All right there.
24/7.
Okay.
Yeah, that was very nice, Dr. Elmer, because I saw when I went on today, that when you go onto the page, there's another thing that pops up that's in your way, so you have to, it's in your face, it was very, very nice. It was easy to get out of,
And that was because high school and middle school students, the students had access before, they could see grades and everything electronically, but we turned that off while we're working on schedules and getting the school year ready. So we were getting phone calls, why can't I get into my stuff? But parents will have that as well in 23-24.
And the website does look great.
She did a great job.
She did a nice job.
Yeah, and the meet the administrative team was great too, yeah, that looked nice,
Thank you.
yeah. And plus, they'll be able to get all their schedules on there, right?
Schedules,
Report cards.
yep,
That's really good.
report cards, grades, everything will be in one place. That's it.
All right, President's report, we had an executive session held before the meeting at 5:45 for the purpose of legal personnel and safety. Jesse, anything from the IU at this point?
I knew any time.
Thank you. Next will be courtesy of the floor. This courtesy of the floor will be for the public comment on voting agenda items. State your name, address, and agenda item that you would like to address. You will have 3 minutes. All right. Laura Winkleman, you'll be in the second courtesy of the floor. Bob Pryor.
Good evening, Board. I'm just curious, under the superintendent's report, the department coordinator, job description, is this an existing or a new proposed?
Updated.
It's existing, we're updating the job description.
Okay. So who currently does that, can I ask?
There are 15 different department coordinators across the district.
So this one is to coordinate all the coordinators? Is that what it's
No, this would be the job description that is the same for all 15 people.
And basically, those are your secondary things, like your math person, your business person, your history person. There's one that works it's K to 12, but mostly they work 7 through 12.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Pam, Gary, you have personnel. Is the personnel we'll be voting on tonight?
Yes.
Okay, you're next.
I'm not sure, well, you can tell me if can't be sure.
Hi, Pam Garrett, Watson Township. I just wanted, and I've talked to the board about this before in reference to agenda on W and I'm making a comparison of Q and W. So a lot of you may know I am a substitute in the district. I have been for over 10 years. And I've talked to you guys, I've talked to Mr. Ulmer about the substitute pay. Our school district, for the last 10 years, every year, our subs are not, we're not getting subs for clerical and paraprofessionals. we make under $10 an hour. Now, I'm looking, and I don't begrudge anybody their pay, I think it's wonderful, but as an employee working for you guys, I'm comparing the paraprofessionals on W, I'm looking at paraprofessional staff, support staff is making $15 an hour. And that's for an after-school program, you're going to approve that. I think that's wonderful. However, when you compare that to a paraprofessional or a clerical that works during the school year trying to come in to your classes, they're not there. We're not getting the pay, so the positions aren't there. They're not being filled. So I don't know if you guys are aware of how many are not being filled during the school year, but there's a lot. And then those positions aren't being filled, and then they're being taken from other classrooms or whatever to fill that position. So I'm just trying to make you aware. I mean, I think we're looking at Q, a co-op entry level rate of $12 an hour. Again, we're making less than $10 an hour. And I just think it's something that you as a board needs to kind of look at. I'm not saying an astronomical amount, but under $10 an hour for a clerical position and a paraprofessional position in subbing in our school district, I think that it's not.
So for clarification, you're talking about the subbing?
The
Wait,
subbing.
okay.
So-
That's something we try to do yearly, but we'll have to look at it again,
And
especially,
I talked to Dr. Armour about this before, and he had thought 2021, I think was our last discussion.
I think we raised it once
Once.
since then,
Yeah, and you thought it was gonna be at least $10, and it has not come to that. And I just think you're not, I don't know how many of you are aware, but working in the district, those positions are not being filled. I mean, there's daily, there's 3 and 4 positions of paraprofessionals that people have called off, and there's nobody there to fill those positions. And I don't know if you want to stats on it or whatever, but that's the truth. That's what it comes to. So then our students, because I'm a taxpayer, I'm in the district, our taxpayers, our students are not getting the aid that they should be getting. That's all. Thank you.
thank you for bringing it to our attention, and we will look at that. We usually do it sometime during the year, but we'll look at it faster. Shelley?
Calm down. There's so many things I'd like to say, but I'll save what we just watched till the other one.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I have a question which spawned off my thing again. I gave everybody gifts tonight.
Thank you.
Everything edible. You need to spray your peppermint though. That's specifically just for you.
Thank you.
I was looking at E, curriculum and instruction. I would assume that's the assistant superintendent's job. So what I'd like to know is why I couldn't see these guide to good food and adventures and nutrition well. Tried to look at the attachments, couldn't see them. When I sat on the board, we used to be able to review them. They would sit down here for anybody in the public to come look at. I'd like to see them.
Okay.
It looks like you're purchasing them tonight. Anybody else?
We are purchasing tonight, but they are, earlier in the year, we purchased the ones for the middle school. This is for family and consumer science.
This is for middle school?
No, we purchased those earlier in the
What
year.
are these for?
These are for the high school family and consumer science.
Okay, high school. I'd
And
like
they're a follow-up from what the middle school has.
Okay, I'd like to see them. And number G,
G.
finance. How did somebody get to $279? I know we checked them.
Remember, there was a change in the law recently that we cannot deny a student a lunch.
Okay. And then we're gonna go right on back here to curriculum and instruction. There's a reason why everything's sitting right in front of you. I was here last year. wanted to donate something because it kind of looks like, after just hearing some people that were gonna, borrow some more money, because I signed a $12 million bond in 2012. Okay, I know what the rate was, I know it's not paid off, and we're all gonna need to know how to grow our own food. Because this is, I know I've called you all a circus, because this is what it seems like. I sit out here, I heard Michelle, I heard Wayne, and I just couldn't thank them enough. Send them all some stuff, because really, I want to thank you, because I sat in this position 8 years ago. We had $5,000. Sat here trying to figure out how we were going to fix schools that were terrible. We completely redid Jersey Shore Elementary for a reconfiguration plan. They never moved forward. You best not be looking at Sallyburg or Avis, because Avis is not ADA compliant. We don't have that kind of money, like at all. So that's just something to think about. $5,000, and that's really all we had.
Thank you, Shelley.
Yep.
Courtesy, the floor is now closed. Moving on to personnel items. We have the following as volunteer softball coaches effective the 23-24 season: James Reichert, Frank Stetz, Heidi Russell, Justin Ulsimer, Haley Stetz. Appointment of Chris Lorson as head middle school softball coach, and appointment of Joe Miller as assistant middle school softball coach. Granting tenure to Charity Reichert, Madison Davis, Keith McCabe, Mallory Myers, Haley Liddick, who have completed the required 3 years of satisfactory teaching. Acknowledgement that Diane Mentek has reached the Masters Plus 30 level. Correction to the effective date for the appointment of Jessica Lowell, full-time paraprofessional, to the start of the 2023-2024 school year. Appointment of Nicholas Russell as a middle school head coach cheerleader. Appointment of Laura Eck as a middle school assistant cheer coach. Positions and stipend for the high school musical production, drama production, middle school drama production, band production, advisors, positives, behavior leaders, energy champ leaders, SAP team leaders, QBS team leaders, mentors, department coordinators, grade level leaders, K-8 yearbook advisors, and culinary arts event advisors as per 2023-2024 contract. And that is attached. It is not all completed, so we'll be continuing to vote some of those as they become known. Appointment of Jeremy Tyson as middle school assistant football coach. Avery Leone as a volunteer wrestling coach. Accepting a letter of resignation from Hayden Stewart as volunteer wrestling coach. Transfer of Caden Carson from technology intern to a technology co-op student position effective the start of the 2023-2024 school year. Robin Tressler as a van driver and aide for Martins Incorporated. An MOU between Jersey Shore Area School District and Jersey Shore Area Education Association for department coordinators pay schedule effective 2023-2020 to 2028. Appointment of Jennifer Ross as middle school learning support professional. Accepting a letter of resignation from Darcy Jones as high school CTE teacher effective August the 7th, 2023. Appointment of Caleb Thomas as the first assistant varsity boys basketball coach. Professional staff work to the 21st Century After School program at $31 per hour, and the support staff to work at $15 per hour for the 2023-2024 school year. This is a grant that we have had for the past few years, and this is the last year of this grant. FMLA from August the 2nd, 2023 through November 2nd, 2023, approximately for employee 2023-24-05. Appointment of Michael Shaw as the girls' head varsity basketball coach. May I have a motion for A through Y?
So moved.
Second.
Do you have any questions or concerns?
I have a question about why are we voting for an employee for Martin's?
You have to approve anyone that drives the bus or rides the bus. So even though they're not your employee, we are responsible for making sure they have all of their appropriate clearances and paperwork.
Can we do that for all the drivers?
Correct.
Only when there's new ones, like if they've already been hired for previous years, only when there's new
Anybody that
ones.
gets added, we have to do it. And that is something that we can get audited on if we have physical copies of clearances and have approved them.
So we're just voting because obviously they pass all the clearances and that you, yeah, okay.
Can we let people know that W, professional staff to work the 21st century after-school program is on a grant, right?
Yeah, it's a federal grant.
Federal grant, so that we're not paying that, it's a grant money.
Right.
We'll be paying that amount. Okay. I just felt they should know that.
Thank you. Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Curriculum and instruction. A, purchase of guide to good food and adventures in food textbooks. This is also electronic. Purchase of nutrition and well, succeed in life and explore life career textbooks. Again, I believe these are both electronics
Well,
also.
I think the first one is and the second one is not.
Okay. May I have a motion for A and B?
So moved.
Second.
Any concerns or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Not in favor, like sign. The ayes have it. Building and grounds, there's no discussion tonight. Moving over to finance. Exoneration of the following food service debts, and you can see them on the agenda. Exoneration, letter B, exoneration of the following technology debts. And then most of the time what's happened is these people have moved and there's no forwarding address at this point. An agreement between Lycoming, Clinton, CCCA, and Jersey Area School District for July the 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024 for the purchase of meals. Letter D, taxing district respiratory sale acknowledgements of parcel 28-264-112. This is something new with the law that we have to do. Taxing district repository sale acknowledgement of the parcel number 28-243-136. I don't know, Ben, can you give a little synopsis on exactly what that is to the people?
So Solicitor kind of guided me on this. They had unsold properties and they had a bid process at the county level. And these are the bids they received, and it requires the approval of all three taxing bodies. So the county, the school district, and the municipality must all approve of them. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those not in favor, like sign. Motion carries.
Did she have a motion?
I didn't have a
and
motion
second?
on that.
Mike did. Didn't you second that? Oh, no. No, I thought that when I asked you the question. Sorry, let me back up. I need a motion for A through E.
So moved.
Second.
No, sorry about that. I was thinking about it and then I asked a question and I lost track of it. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Miscellaneous items. The following policy is at its first read, policy 717, cellular telephones. This has to do with adults, employees. The following policies at the second read, policy 249, which is bullying / cyberbullying. C, an agreement with Bayada Home Healthcare Incorporated to provide nursing service for student 23-24-10 from August the 24th, 2023 to June 1st of 2024. Amendment of agreement with Geisinger Clinic to perform student athletic physicals and review and sign standing orders for the Jersey Area School District effective June the 25th, 2018 to June 24th, 2024. And an MOU between Jersey Area School District and Step Head Start for classroom space at the Jersey Elementary School effective June the 1st, 2023 through June the 30th, 2024. Old business is next. There's nothing identified. Anyone want to bring anything up? Hearing none, we'll move on. Courtesy of the floor. This courtesy of the floor will be for public comment on non-agenda items. State your name, address, and identify what you would like to address, and you will have 3 minutes. Anybody can do this, but we do have one that signed up. Laura? We cannot discuss that in a public meeting.
I understand that. I just want to make sure that people are aware that this is happening. I'm not discussing behind the scenes or whatever's going on. That's not my purpose here. I just want to make sure that the public is aware that this has happened. And I also would like to ask, I know that there is a meeting next Tuesday to address this personnel meeting, which is open to the public. So I would like to ask at that time, at that meeting, will the public be allowed to speak?
Yes, so consistent with the policy, because it's an open meeting, there will be time for public participation before the board goes to a vote.
Okay, so there will be time for comment from the public.
Yes.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to know. I'd also like to know at this time who is in the position at this point in a temporary basis, and what are the qualifications of that person that is in that position temporarily at this point?
I don't think I can answer that because it's personnel. Okay. I can't answer that, it's personnel.
Okay, thank you.
It is being followed through, though, more than one.
There is somebody in the position. Okay. I also want to make the public aware that an award has been given to the athletic department and the athletic director. And this award is coming from the NIAAA Quality Program Assistance designation, making Jersey Shore one of 4 schools in Pennsylvania to receive this award. And Ms. Henry will be honored in the final closing sessions of the National Athletic Directors Conference in Orlando in December. So I want you to be aware that she is receiving this award in December.
There, living on fixed incomes, I mean, why don't you just turn their pockets inside out? You know what I mean? It was pushed through. Over the past months, it was apparent, you're not gonna like this. The controlling majority already made their minds up on the class reconfiguration or closure of an official school building. You showed your bias by your actions and inactions. Board leadership moved this board in directions exposing bias, lack of character, integrity, and infidelity within our Board of Education. I'm ashamed of the school board. I've never seen a school board like this before. School board Shelley and I were on, we were united, we worked together, and we knew how to prioritize. We knew which end of the hammer to pick up. Witnessing a teacher's contract being forced to a vote, while some negotiators voiced their concerns, made it apparent this board is tainted. You favored the pocketbooks of board members who voted for a spouse, child, and the leadership's friends currently teaching in the district who stand to gain a significant increase in their retirement. You also ignored the concerns and the advice of our district business manager. Why don't you just fire him? You're not listening to him. Sadly, after 5 years of this agreement, we could be looking at more tax increases or furloughs of less senior educators. It's always the less seniors that get furloughed. The most seniors will survive. And I'm happy for them, okay? Whatever the negative results are, we need to remember it's now public record. You flush us taxpayers down the drain. And now you're looking at spending more on these inefficient buildings. Where are you going to get the money? The taxpayers are hurting, and when are you going to recognize that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Pryor, just because you believe something doesn't make it true.
I know more than you do about a school district. You're just a principal.
Shelley Helm, Pia Township. Is this on?
Yes.
It was on earlier, I could hear my echoing. Look on binoc, you can hear it. Site logic. Number 3, that's what I'm gonna call them. We're gonna go back before Hunt, because Hunt was done during COVID. Let's go back to Crabtree. And I'm gonna go back, let me see, 2012, 8 years, 2005, I got on the school board. Oh, we did. You know this, Mary. All we did was safety, safety, safety. It was one thing after another. These people that were here tonight, that's nice they were here tonight. It was also nice that Brian had fill-ins for Jamie Doyle here, because I know Jamie. I think you should go back to Crabtree. And then while you do that, because we did that so long ago and it was done so perfect, because we also did a reconfiguration during that period of time, that PD still has. And whether you all want to sit here and keep pushing your own agendas, you need to look at the facts. The facts are Pennsylvania, Taxsylvania, Jersey Shore Area School District. Take a ride around here. People can't afford it. There's probably a reason you have to put, let me go on over here to finance, D&E on here. They're sheriff sales. Why were they sheriff sales? Are they older individuals who couldn't afford to live here anymore? I mean, right around town. It's Rent Haven. Don't even know anybody who's walking down the street. Like at all. So I think y'all should maybe go back to the Crabtree Row Ball and maybe take a good, real look at that, because we spent 8 full years doing that. Talk to somebody at PD. I know people that work there. Might be something you might really want to think about before you press on and get us into more debt that we can't afford. Like I said, 2005, it could happen again. Beautifying places. No roof done. And we still have one of those people who was recognized tonight because they put her back. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Steve Helm, also by the township. So I wasn't able to attend I wasn't even aware that they had a capital projects meeting. I would have attended that and paid attention to what was listed as priorities. I know there is a list out there that you folks are looking at, you're considering what you need to do and so on. One of the things that you kind of really need to just kind of think back about some of the decisions that you make when you sit here rubber stamp stuff and just say, okay, good, all in favor, aye, yay. You're responsible for then funding some of those decisions. And you're responsible to the taxpayers, to the school district, to everybody here, and it's a lot of responsibility. So you approved the teacher's contract, you had members who were on the negotiating committee who spoke up and said, hey, boy, this is gonna be tough, we can't afford this. And Wayne was one of them, I won't say names, I get it. My understanding was that the business manager also had some concerns about how that contract and the costs associated with that contract over the next 5 years will be funded. But it was approved. The yeas have already been done. So now we bring in tonight, after the capital projects meeting, we bring in people to tell you, you can borrow money. Sure you can. You can borrow money. Borrow the money that comes out of everybody's pockets here and out in your community. Realistically, the yays, this should have been nays, or should have been maybe a different vote, would have been to go along with Dr. Ulmer's recommendation and close the schools and go with option A. But we voted with our emotion and we kept option C. Well, option C had costs associated with it as well. So we're keeping buildings open, and now we have to look at how we're going to fix, repair, and maintain these buildings. When realistically, if you had shrunken down your footprint of buildings, maybe it would be a smaller scope of a project. So you can't just look at the day as being almost over. You have to look at what's going to be happening tomorrow, what's going to be happening next year. There's a lot to what you folks do. And while you have a small snapshot of the community sitting here, people watch and people pay attention and people are affected, period, by your decisions for years, many years, on and on and on and on. So, it's something that maybe you want to revisit, maybe you want to reconsider before you start borrowing money. Maybe we do need to shrink down our footprint. Maybe we need to revisit some of those ideas and concepts. Maybe we need to listen to the people that we employ and pay a lot of money to make those recommendations based on the numbers of students and so on. You have people in place, they made recommendations, we went against them, and now we're going to fund them. So you got to figure that all out. I appreciate your time, thank you.
I just wanted to focus on Miss Henry, the athletic director. I was surprised seeing that there was a notification looking for a new person. But I wanted to focus on the quality program award that she won from the NI.
It's not to be discussed in a public meeting.
Not the award, what was consisted of.
You're talking about personnel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, courtesy, the floor is closed. There will be an executive session following this meeting for negotiations, after which no further business will be offered. May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Motion is adjourned.